Okay. Should we dive right into our topics?
Yeah, let's get back into it. Today's a little bit of a earlier morning podcast, so people might be a little bit sleepier than usual. Kailey's yawning right now, and that'll probably be contagious. But today I wanted to talk about the topic of depression, and it's somewhat relevant to COVID. I've been hearing in the news that mental health has been on the decline since COVID has started. Everybody locked inside. It has not been good for mental health. Have you guys kind of personally felt that, or have you seen that? Because I always want to be cautious when like you see these headlines in the news to not just take that as a pure fact and to actually think, is this really applying to me? Because I find it's easy to get influenced by headlines, or especially comments on stuff. Like, if I watch a video, I might have thought one thing, and then I scroll down in the comments, and then my opinion gets really influenced by everybody else's. So
yeah, and
you
I
gotta
always
be careful.
I can't help but always just think about the news as like a straight up business, and there's like somebody in there who's like some like intern comes with the headline. It's like everybody doing okay, and then he's like, no, make it more sensational. Yeah, and like they profit off like being like the more people click the advertisements, right? Exactly. So the crazier they can make it, or the more crazy. Like
I was saying last time, is that the COVID for like journalism and news media, in a sense, they might have been like celebrating when they found this out, because now they're like, we're gonna have great content that we can publish for the next year.
They're not gonna be like on like whatever, like the late night, and they're like, what are we gonna run tomorrow? They got the constant of like always COVID. It's a backup plan,
because that would be something I would think you'd be worried about as a journalist, is that you're gonna be running out of content and you're always trying to scramble, what's the new thing? But with COVID, every week there's new numbers you can put out and new this and whatever it is.
Anyway, with the depression thing, spicy topic, I think. I don't think spicy's the right word.
Spicy's probably not the right word.
Maybe more emotionally
it's a dicey,
heavy.
Dicey topic. But it maybe it doesn't have to be, though. I think, I guess it's something we'll have to be a little bit more careful with and considerate. But I don't know if it necessarily has to be a dicey thing, because at the end of the day, all we're really doing is we're talking based on our personal experiences and some of the things that we've learned about this topic. And that's all we ever can do with any topic, is just talk on that. And as I was kind of looking into this topic, I realized that maybe it'd probably be good to do another podcast on the same topic, just because I was realizing there's so many avenues to go down with depression, and it's a pretty complex topic. But for now, we'll do what we can, which is talk based on our experiences, and that's it. And obviously we're not doctors, and so I was thinking that it might be wise to avoid talking as much as we can, or it depends what you guys think, but kind of avoid talking about statistics, and also about medication in particular, like the actual biology of the medication, just because
that should be easy for me, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe that's not too much of a challenge, but because the statistics one, I found some kind of interesting statistics online, and I'll mention one of them, but I don't want to go too much into it because we don't have anybody to back it up. Like, I was thinking it'd be nice to have like a Jamie, like Joe Rogan's assistant, to just be like, Jamie, pull that up, make sure what we're saying is accurate. But we don't, so maybe we'll avoid talking too much about statistics for now. What do you think about that? Kailey, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, but I think personally, for I mean, like, I've definitely gone through some depressed states through this COVID thing for sure. Like, and talking to friends and stuff too, it all seems the kind of same. It's almost like the being put in the lockdowns like this and cutting off social connections, and like a lot of the things we have to do is almost like a recipe for depression in a way. If you
Yeah.
guys like feel that too.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I really like, that idea that there can be recipes for depression.
Right.
Just the fact that certain things are almost inevitably gonna cause you to become depressed, and so then when depression hits for you personally, or you see somebody else who's depressed, you're not necessarily asking what's wrong with them. You might be wondering like, oh, what happened to them? What did they go through that they're now depressed? And I feel like it's a slightly different way to look at it.
Right.
Yeah. Do you guys think that, like, in general, how do you feel that people look at others when they find out that they're depressed? Is it generally in like a positive way, or is it like a confused way, like they just don't understand, or is it like a potentially a negative way where they're judging them and
hard to generalize, but thankfully a lot of
it's
the
all
people,
three, really. You'll get all three of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think like just from like my own experiences, hearing when somebody says they're depressed, or they'll like kind of confide in you, or like, I don't know if that's the right word either, but kind of like bring up their depression. I find the first reaction is you just don't really know what to do. It's kind of like you just like, you want to help, but it's like, but I don't know how.
Yeah. Well, I think
it's
just
like,
firstly, the idea that someone trusts you enough or feels comfortable to confide in you and share that they're feeling depressed is means that you're a good friend, or that they feel comfortable saying that to you. Unfortunately, depression still has a stigmatization where people don't always feel comfortable sharing. So just knowing that you're a friend that maybe someone feels they can confide in is great.
Yeah. It is kind of like an awkward thing, because like on the other side of things, when you tell somebody you're feeling depressed, it's like you don't really know what you're expecting them to do either.
Yeah. It might just be, a lot of time you might not even necessarily be expecting them to be giving you, I don't know, like some great advice or feedback. You just kind of want to get it off your chest a little bit.
Yeah. And that, I think, ultimately helps, just even doing that.
Yeah. The one statistic that I did want to bring up, just because I know I said I was going to try to avoid them, but yeah. I thought this one was interesting. And again, I forget what website I saw it on, but it kind of makes sense to me. So basically, before COVID, one out of 10 people, when they're filling out a survey, would fill in that they're feeling depressed or anxious. And ever since COVID hit, I forget what exact date, but that kind of spiked up to 40%. And now even like I've seen in the news, one of my friends actually mentioned to me the term COVID fatigue, which is basically another way of saying depression, but I guess they didn't want to say that. So,
right.
But that's the general consensus, I guess, is that depression has been on the rise ever since COVID has started.
40%,
and that's a big, that's a big jump.
That's a huge jump.
And that's why I want to be like cautious with the stats, because it'd be nice to be like, pull it up right there and we can look through it.
Yeah.
But that's all we have right now.
I mean, 40%.
That's
and that number is not just like looking at the world around me and talking to people. It's like not surprising to hear a jump like that has happened, because it definitely feels like that. I think, but
yeah, like for you guys, has it been? Would you be able to say before COVID you had better mental health, and then after COVID it kind of declined? For me personally, I don't think that's actually the case, but
I mean, I would say before COVID I had better mental health, but by accident, where like I was just like you're doing these social relationships and you're being more physical and whatnot, without really understanding that is like in a way treating or fighting off your depression from like setting in too hard.
Right.
But then once all that stuff goes away, then you can kind of spiral really quickly without even really realizing that was like supporting you.
Yeah, I've had, I guess, a similar experience in that I didn't like, it's kind of been gradual, and there's just kind of like a sadder tone to everything right now. So I wouldn't say that I am depressed, but I've felt some depressive symptoms,
Right.
and
That's what the stat is. It's not necessarily you're severely depressed. I just want to make that clear because 40% sounds very, very high, but that's what it is. It's like people are feeling more depressive symptoms more often.
Right. And it's also like for me personally, I have my job, and there are lots of things that I'm very grateful for at this time. It's hard though, just seeing the sadness in the world, and the sadness, just like you were saying, Sammy, having friends or just family members, or just feeling like everyone has that sense of sadness, or that they're grieving something from their old life, and that just kind of, whether it's me personally like feeling sad about something, but just seeing other people, kind of, it's that domino effect of like, oh
Yeah,
I
it
wish
definitely
everyone
is
could have what they like, people whose weddings have been canceled, or things in their life that didn't happen this year.
Definitely reminiscent of the old times too. You'll see some old photos or something, and you're like, oh man, it's been a year already. Like, how long is this gonna last?
Yeah, and the environment definitely can influence you. Like if you're noticing that a lot in other people, odds are is that they're gonna like, everybody's gonna rub off on each other essentially.
Right.
Like you guys have heard that saying of like, you basically become like the 5 people that you hang out with the most.
Yeah, the sum of like your friends or whatever.
Yeah, so if everybody's on average feeling worse, then you're likely to as well. And I think the actual physical environment of it being winter right now doesn't help with that. Like naturally, I think there's a bit of a decline or an increase in depression on the winter months, because you look outside and it literally looks gloomy. Like the sky is usually gray. Like for the whole winter. Like every now and then you'll get a nice blue sky, but that's rare.
Get that. What is that? SAD, seasonal depression. What is the acronym for something?
Seasonal affective disorder. So where the season affects your mood and your
right. So already you're getting, or some people get more depressed in the winter.
Yeah.
Which I definitely feel that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of that could be due to the just not getting a lot of sun. From what I've learned is that the sun actually is a trigger for a lot of your genes. A lot of like it turns on a lot of the genes that are good for you within your body.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, because the sun is it creates, like, through your body, it creates vitamin D, right? And vitamin D is they're calling it a hormone now, which is basically, to put it simply, I guess, is it leveled up from just being a vitamin.
Okay.
It's more important. I
What
forget
all
the exact.
vitamins aspire to be.
They're all trying to just become a hormone, but vitamin D did it. It's like when the one person, I guess, like in the family graduate or makes it past college or whatever. That's kind of like what happened
with vitamin D.
All the other vitamins are watching. Like,
I started taking vitamin D
proud,
this winter for the first time, like every day, and it might be the placebo, but I actually feel like I feel better. So I've heard all Canadians are deficient in vitamin D, so you can't go wrong taking it.
Right.
We all need it, and
I also heard that it's great for COVID, like you're helping your immune system fight it off or whatnot.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that too. It seems to be like a really, really important thing. I've heard it's extremely important for mood regulation, which is probably why. I mean, Kailey, it might be a placebo. Who knows? You'd have to.
Yeah, I know. I had heard my doctor had mentioned the mood regulation portion, and I thought, well, why the heck not? When I'll give it a try. And
slamming back vitamin D. How much do you take?
I take 2,000 IU.
Okay.
A day. You take 4,000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're different sizes, so I'm not good.
Yeah, we're different sizes. Plus, I heard this on a podcast. Someone, Joe Rogan, had a guest on that was like, I take 4,000, 5,000. And then I was like, all right, I'll do the same. I didn't really. It was a doctor who he was talking to, so I trusted it. But I've heard some people even say they take 15,000, which to me is like,
wait, how
ridiculous.
much is 4,000 in like the
four tablets?
4 tablets?
Yeah, I have the 1,000 IU tablets.
Yeah, I do as well. So I take 2 of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you on the vitamin D? Should we be getting you this for your birthday?
I have it upstairs, but
Because the only time
I'll
we can buy
go-
things is for people's birthdays.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the rule.
You're gonna
No,
have to wait.
I take it as much as I can, but I was just doing one pill a day. That's not enough, eh?
No.
And I would often forget too. So
Oh shoot.
Oof. Yeah. You're missing out, I think, on that hormone. But yeah. So I think a decent way to kind of go about this podcast would be to split it up into a few different categories, and we'll kind of avoid talking about the medication and the stats, like I said, and more focus on the environmental and kind of social and other factors that you can kind of control that do seem to have an influence on your depression. And that I've touched on 2 already a little bit, maybe even 3, the social, but we said the environment definitely does feel like it has an impact, like in the winter right now when the sky is gray and we don't get a lot of sun. That seems to lead to people being seasonally depressed. Then there's a bit of the biology, which maybe we won't dive into too much, but there's things you can do. Vitamin D, get more sunlight, and I've heard exercise is actually very, very beneficial for that.
Does a tanning bed give you vitamin D?
I don't know.
I've never been in one.
Yeah, me neither.
Kaylee?
Maybe it's
I
time to
have
start.
been in one, and I don't know. I wasn't going in there for the vitamin D.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, back to your point. Exercise is one for sure I notice like really helps me.
Yeah.
Me too. It was like, for me, there was a day last week where I just was not in a good mood, and I didn't want to exercise, and I was sitting on the couch going like, oh, everything. I'm just like not feeling good, and I was feeling sad, and then I tried not to overthink it and just got up and started doing some this lightweight training, and it was like I could not believe I've never experienced the 180 I felt in that like exercise session.
Yeah.
That was it like amazing to me.
Yeah.
Because I actually just like I was like smiling, lifting the weights, and I was like Matt's in the kitchen making dinner. I'm just like,
I didn't think
oh
that was
my
actually a real thing. Like, you know how you see in magazines or in ads, like people smiling while they're working out?
Yeah.
I was always like, that's so fake, but I guess it is real. Like, you're saying you did it, right?
I did it. I actually felt really good, and unfortunately, that's not what happens every time I'm trying to like get myself off the couch to exercise or work out.
Yeah.
But it's nice to be reminded that there sometimes is that like really you do feel that direct positive impact of exercise.
Yeah. And the cruel thing is like before you exercise, when you're sitting there and you maybe are feeling a little bit depressed, it's so hard to motivate yourself to do that. Even if you kind of can tell yourself, I'm going to feel better after I exercise. Right. Sometimes it's just so difficult to do it.
If you're feeling in like a bad mood or in a like a bad state, because I feel like feeling depressed is more of a bigger thing, whereas
lifestyle.
Well, you don't feel like you don't just like feel depressed for a moment, you know what I mean? That's more like I have a bad mood or I'm feeling sad right now,
right?
So
can you not though? Like last weekend, after I wanted to bring this up, is that we actually tried to do this podcast before and it didn't turn out well, and then after that I was feeling kind of depressed. And is that not considered depression?
No, I guess you're right. I guess it like you said in the beginning, it's such a big term. There's so much to the word depression and feeling depressed. Just for some reason when Sammy said it there, I thought, you know, he's like, I said like, oh, I was sitting on the couch and I was feeling depressed, and I was like, oh, would that be the emotional state you feel, or rather the underlying like kind of state that you're in for a longer period of time, and rather that you feel, I don't know, actually.
Right.
I don't know.
I think you could be acutely depressed, meaning like you'll be depressed just for maybe even a few hours.
Right.
Because the timeline doesn't actually really matter. Obviously, to qualify for being like clinically depressed, I've looked up the the like check sheet that
Okay.
kind of requires you to be depressed for a long period of time.
Okay.
Because the clinically depressed thing is you need to check all the boxes and be depressed for a while, and then maybe you could look into getting medication. But
Right.
yeah, I think to just say that you're depressed, I don't think there needs to be any time period really.
Okay. No, you're probably right. I think I'm just getting tripped up a little bit on the language and the terminology and what constitutes what, but you're right, it
Yeah.
really is subjective. And I mean, it's absolutely fine for you to say, I know
Yeah.
what depression feels like to me, and this
Yeah.
is what I feel right now. So
But
no, you're right,
I think to simplify where I was getting at with that point is, in times when you need it the most, it's the hardest to do.
Yeah,
Right,
for sure.
right,
And-
exactly.
And I wanted to bring up the us trying to do the podcast last week and it not working out for two reasons, and one kind of ties into what you're saying there, Sammy, about how it can be the toughest to exercise or do the things that are going to relieve you of depression when you're feeling depressed. And it's almost like a like rich get richer type of scenario where like
Yeah,
if you're on the
exactly.
bottom, it might be especially hard to rise back up because
Or
you're feeling so tough, like you're feeling so
it's
down.
even the opposite, and it's like snowball effect.
Yeah.
Like you just bring yourself deeper.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
the snowball effect or spiraling could definitely be real, but like you're saying, Kailey, the 180 effect of something like exercise can be amazing. Like you wouldn't even you would never expect that, especially maybe you're feeling down and someone tells you, oh, go work out, and you're like, yeah, that's not really gonna work, but it can be pretty amazing. And after we did that failure after we tried to do the podcast and it
Yeah.
failed, I was feeling kind of down, and I'll get into kind of why a little bit later. But the one thing I was thinking is, I've always heard it's beneficial to work out or exercise when you're feeling down, and here I am now feeling pretty bad, and I was like, I really do not want to work out though. And I was like, I was just about to talk about the podcast of depression, and I was going to talk about how exercise is a good thing to do, but now I'm here and I'm like, oh my goodness, I do not want to work out. I eventually ended up doing it just because you know that, and you almost need to prove it to yourself a few times where like you see the results to really want to go do it.
Yeah.
But I knew that it would end up helping me. But there's so much more of a like a barrier between you and working out when you're feeling depressed versus when you're in a great mood. It's like, yeah, I'll work out, sure. But overcoming that barrier is worth it, I would say.
Yeah. And the kind of
And
a mental workout, because
Yeah,
each
exactly.
time you can
And-
kind of get yourself to work out.
Yeah, and it goes to show, like, it's just like doesn't make sense how you can know that there's a right thing to do and you still just like can't do it.
With so many
it's like-
things,
It's
so
Yeah.
many habits, like you know what is the right thing to do, but it's very, very challenging.
It's hard. So what do you find helpful? All you said for exercise specifically, if you're feeling down, you might just do it. You don't think about it too much. You just kind of maybe look back and think about how in previous times exercise has made you feel better, and you remind yourself of that, and then you go for it.
Yeah, I think you just trust that it will be beneficial, and I guess that trust has to outweigh how bad you're feeling. I don't know. It's not a simple thing, I guess.
No.
For me, I just knew that it'd be a good idea to work out, but I've probably been in scenarios where I felt even more depressed than that weekend that we tried. And in those situations, maybe I couldn't have worked out. I don't know. I don't want to say it's as simple as, because some people might be feeling like severely depressed, and it's even more challenging for them to just get up and start doing a crazy workout. But
like
if you are
said,
able
we're just
to,
speaking from our personal
Yeah,
experiences, and depression is like there's so much to it that we're speaking, I think, also on COVID related kind of like feeling down and that.
Yeah, and to touch on the exercise and the benefits of it, I was listening to a podcast on that, And have you guys heard of the term neuroplasticity?
Yeah.
You have, Kailey?
Yeah.
Sammy, you just laughed. So
Oh,
yeah.
We all know that.
You use it a few times a day, right?
Yeah. Neuroplasticity.
Yeah, but basically it's the idea that your brain isn't in a static form. Like, it does change throughout your life, and it can kind of get molded depending on if you're consistently doing certain activities or habits into a slightly like different configuration or have different like neural connections. Like if you're always exercising and always like meditating, your brain might actually change its configuration slightly. And the only reason I bring that up is because I've heard that exercise is like very, very good for allowing that to happen. Through exercising. And I'm just repeating this on a podcast. I don't want to like pretend like I have like a biology degree or anything, but like I've heard that exercise increases what's called the brain derived neurotrophic factor. Hope I'm saying that right, but basically that is an important key for neuroplasticity. So in order for your brain to kind of change and adapt and it can change and adapt in a positive or a negative way. So if you're always having negative habits, or maybe you're like consistently isolating yourself, your brain may actually start to change to better fit whatever you're doing. But I really, really like that idea that you can actually kind of reshape your brain in a certain way, and exercise is a bit of a booster for that.
Right.
Cool.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And other than that, I also wanted to bring up the fact that the podcast didn't go well because I just wanted to talk about the fact that meaningful values and like where you place your values is a key for feeling depressed. And for me, one thing that I realized is that the reason why I felt so depressed after failing the podcast is because I'd put basically all my eggs in one basket in a sense.
Yeah.
Maybe not literally all of them, but I put a lot on it, and I spent a lot of time kind of preparing to do that podcast last weekend, and it didn't really work out. And I think there's something to be said there, and maybe a bit of like a word of caution, I guess, is almost like be careful that you're not putting everything you have into one thing. You almost want to, like they say in accounting, like diversify your portfolio, like diversify your portfolio of life.
That sounds like such a buzzword.
You know what? It's like I've experienced this too, just from like playing in bands, and you'll be really like spending all your time going for the show, and then the show doesn't go well, and you get basically really upset and kind of throw me into a bit of a depression, or it can. And I think it's like you said, like you're basically putting your worth into an activity, which I think is not the greatest thing.
I knowing you guys, I know that productivity is really important to you, and I feel like your worth, you guys get a lot of your worth or confidence from the productivity in your life.
Yeah, and I think too that for the why the podcast failing could have like, it could basically have an even bigger effect, and it kind of depends on why you're doing it. The book that I read on depression for this podcast is called Lost Connections. Just to bring it up and give it a little bit of credit, Lost Connections by Johann Hari. But they talk about meaningful values and how you can either have values on intrinsic things or extrinsic things. So to give an example for this podcasting, if I had extrinsic values, I would be doing the podcast for the results. That's basically what extrinsic values are, is that you're not doing the thing because you really enjoy doing it. You're doing it for the results that come along with it. And from what he was saying is that's
like validation from other people potentially, or like financial gain or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that type of mindset or frame of doing things for the results tends to lead you to becoming far more unhappy than if you're doing it just for the actual thing itself. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, like for to give the other example, so if I was just doing the podcast because I wanted to become as good at podcasting as possible, and I was kind of excited and curious at like where that could end up leading, that would be more likely to make me happier as time goes along and I see that I am improving as a podcaster.
Right.
And obviously you can appreciate some of the extrinsic things, because people, it would be like delusional to say that you're not gonna you could just not care about the results at all. Obviously, like you want to get some feedback and all that, but
maybe it
won't lead you to be happiness as much.
And maybe you'll be less set back when things happen, like last weekend where something doesn't go right, and it's like, in your words, a failure, I guess. Yeah. But it's like if you are like based on intrinsic values, I think it's easier to overcome these like failures when they happen.
Yeah. And that might not be a super relatable example of like an intrinsic value, but in the book they mention like typical intrinsic values would be like you want to be a good friend, or like maybe you want to be a good parent, or you want to just help people, not because you're looking to get results from helping these people, but just because you genuinely feel like you want to help that person. And the studies that they talked about in the book had shown that people would feel far happier on a sustained basis when they have more of those intrinsic values. They're doing things just because they want to do them, and they're not looking for the rewards, versus people who are looking more for the rewards. They might get a little hit, like a spike of happiness when they do get that reward, but it would fade away very, very quickly. Like if you got that new car, or you got that new raise at work, or you got that new clothes or new necklace, you might get a spike in happiness for a short little while. Or if you posted a picture and you got a lot of like feedback and comments and stuff, you might get a little spike for a little bit, but that will fade rather quickly. And it might even fade to the point where you become more depressed than you were before, because you had expected maybe you're like, I want to get this new car, and you have in your mind that this car is going to make you really, really happy, and then you get the car, and maybe you're super excited and happy for a little while, and then as the days go by, you're like, wow, this isn't, like, I don't really care about this anymore, and I thought this was going to make me happy, and now it's not, and now you're kind of at square one, which could even be even more depressing than before.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was trying to think of an example.
That makes a lot of sense. I think an
but
example in my life that maybe you guys can relate to a simple one is just Christmas morning. You're like, especially when you're a kid and you're like, oh man, I'm gonna get
oh man
oh man, Santa's coming.
Yeah.
And then you're like, this is gonna be the best day ever. Then you open all the gifts, maybe you get a couple of pairs of socks or something. And then, but then you're like, man, this is still kind of a fun day. But then the day goes on, and then you're like, it's over.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and then maybe some days pass after that, and then you're like, not that happy anymore.
Yeah.
I do that pretty much every weekend, where I set myself up to maybe for disappointment, because I look forward to the weekend a lot, and then I have this idea that on the weekend I have to make the most of it and make it like really fun and do all these fun activities, and I don't want to just sit around, and I want to do all this stuff. And then if I feel like I'm getting into the territory that's not happening, like it'll be Saturday afternoon and I'm like, shoot, like I haven't done all these fun activities.
Right.
And then I start to feel down, and like it's like, well, what was I doing with my time? And I feel like I should be okay with the idea that maybe I won't be doing all this stuff on the weekend, and I can still enjoy the weekend, and I don't have to be like upset with myself.
Right. Yeah. The expectations could really set you up for
Yeah.
feeling down. I find one that people could probably relate to a lot of the time is like New Year's Eve, or like
Yeah.
maybe even your birthday.
Yeah.
Where you have a lot of
I can relate to
expectations, like,
that.
oh, this has got to be the best, and then
Yeah.
it comes down time to the day, and you're like, oh no, like this isn't what I wanted. Like you're dreaming in your head of like some magical day.
Yeah.
And so basically I feel like that's what happens, is that's how what kind of leads to you feeling a lack of content or feeling depressed, is that you're not okay with whatever is happening. Like what you want or what you feel like you need is disconnected from what you have. And that's why they say that desire is suffering, essentially. Like, and Kailey, I've said this one to you before about like how desire is basically a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you're desiring.
Yes.
And it is that way just because when you are desiring anything, the underlying statement there is that you're not content with what you currently have, and that's why you want that other thing.
Yeah.
So if it comes the day of your birthday or New Year's Eve or whatever it is, and you're just sitting there like, no, I wanted this thing, and you currently don't have it, that is going to set you up to not be very happy with that.
Yeah, when you first told me that, I thought that was so fascinating and interesting, and I've tried to change the way I think about things.
And that I think that's one thing that came from, again, I was listening to a podcast and I heard someone say that, but the guy was saying that that's kind of like some old Buddhist wisdom. And he went on to say, and I really like this idea, that a lot of the best things for happiness, like the best ways of living, come from kind of the, like, maybe not specifically Buddhism, but like the old, like, wise traditions that have lasted for a really long time. And obviously it depends which tradition. I don't want to just say all of them, but there are some old ones, maybe specifically in like the Buddhist practices, that are very good for feeling happy and living a life full of less suffering. And that the modern advice and like the modern era is actually not very good for leading you to a happy life, because there's so many distractions and you're getting pulled in so many different ways. There's all these like advertisements that are essentially telling you you're not good enough unless you buy a product, and then you will be, because that's like the like one of the most simple ways an advertisement works, right? Is it's trying to promote to the idea that you're not
out what you're missing,
or
what you're lacking.
And they don't necessarily care all the time about how they're affecting your psychology. No, they just want you to buy their product, right?
Especially if you're talking about like beauty products and stuff, I feel like they just prey on people's insecurities.
That's all it is. Yeah. So like in the modern era right now, there's all these if you go online, if you go on social media, there's going to be all these people maybe doing things or having things or whatever it is that you want to do that you're not doing that, and then you look on TV and there's throwing advertisements at you. And I feel like a lot of this might be like more subconscious, like you might not be super aware that this is happening, but as the days go on, it could really be affecting where you place your values, because if all the advertisements are telling you that you're going to gain happiness from buying more things, or maybe from like, you look on Instagram or you look at celebrities and they have very high elevated status. So those are two things then you're going to maybe look at and assume that if you elevate your status or if you buy all these new things, then you're going to feel better. But like we were saying, those are extrinsic things. Those are like materialistic things that will maybe give you a little short-term boost in happiness. But through the long term, they actually will not really provide you with much. If anything, they'll be like, I like the term, like it's like a hedonic treadmill. So like you continually adapt to like getting the new pleasure or the new thing. So maybe as you get the new clothes, or like as you start to rise up a little bit, you're going to continue to adapt and want the next best thing and the next newest thing. And another thing about that if you're placing your self-worth on having the next best thing or having acknowledgement or validation from other people, is that you're placing your self-worth in the hands of something you can't totally control. Because what happens when styles change and all the stuff that you had your self-worth on is no longer there? Or what happens if all the people that you've been that have been supporting your self-worth, they change their opinion and now they're not supporting you? Does your self-worth just crumble? It might. and that's why when you're placing it onto like materialistic extrinsic things, it's not as stable and it's not as sturdy, versus if it's intrinsic things where you just want to be the best person you can, you want to be the best friend, you want to be the best whatever it is, and you're just trying to do that, that's a lot more stable ground. People can't really take that away from you, right? Like you could always try to be the best parent or best friend. Like nobody could really stop you from doing that. So if you place your self-worth on stuff like that,
Right.
it's far more stable. But it's not necessarily easy, especially when you're getting influenced by a lot of media to do the absolute opposite of what might be best for your well-being.
Yeah.
Instead of it's subconscious, you're not even aware of the influences that things are having on you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like I'm just going through all the things, like definitely things in my life that almost rely on it's not totally intrinsic, and I think I'm definitely relying on other people's things. Like I really one that comes to mind right away is like social media stuff, where you're like posting things and then you like wait for the likes and the comments from your friends, and you're like, like I'll definitely, sometimes when you post something you can feel your mood like shifting depending on what happens.
If the likes aren't coming in, you're like, uh-oh, like what are we doing here?
And then they start coming in and you're like, ooh, I'm a good boy.
It's like crazy how like it's like for those stock market guys out there, it's like a volatile stock. Like your mood is basically like going up and down like crazy as the likes are coming in or they're not coming in. And like maybe 1 minute you're like super excited and the next minute you're depressed. You're like, oh no. And it's just not stable ground at all.
And it would be nice to be like in that situation, it's like I'm posting this and my shirt looks cool and I don't care what anybody else says. But I feel like that's even easier said than done. Yeah,
because I mean, I guess the underlying thing is, why are you posting it for other people to see?
Right.
You wouldn't. It almost wouldn't even make sense if you're just posting it and you're like, I just want. I like this shirt. I don't care what anybody thinks. And it's like, okay, well, why do you share it then?
Yeah.
So it's a weird balance, because I've even thought about that, and like about for this podcast is like, why even. I don't know, like why even share it? I've thought about that, but then like, part of the reason I don't know, podcast is maybe different because I don't know, it's something to think about for sure. But what do you think about that? Because like, I see. Yeah,
I feel like
I see that the quality of the podcast would significantly go down if I was focusing primarily on just getting as much likes and kind of maybe altering the form of the podcast, so it's like maybe like a short little thing that like maybe is more consumable,
appease the masses.
Yeah, exactly. So but and then I know that would lead me to being
I feel like it's gotta be
ground.
Like you said like a little bit earlier, it's kind of like delusional to think that you're doing like you're not thinking about these kind of rewards that could come like in certain ways, because I think that is like a motivating factor which will help you progress and like become better at things like this when you are kind of going for feedback and stuff. But I think like you said, it's like as long as you have that solid ground that comes from like internal like your own just internal satisfaction first and foremost, and then the other things are like
it's
second,
like an added bonus.
Exactly.
It's not that you don't care about them, because that'd be delusional to say you don't care about
because
that,
it is nice like at the end of the day. And if you're not like, if everything's like completely like self-motivated and I'm doing this for myself and I'm not sharing with anything, then it's kind of like when you're doing things like this, it's almost just like, why do anything? You know? It's like
you live in an external world at the end of the day, so you can talk all about how you're doing everything for yourself, but like you live in the society, the world, so that's you gotta actually be caring about some of the external things. But it might come back to how diverse is your portfolio, or like being mindful of where are you actually placing more of your self-worth. Where is it coming from? Is it coming primarily from the feedback you get, or is it coming from the like more intrinsic thing of actually doing the podcast or whatever it is that you're doing?
And when someone you trust, like getting their positive feedback, or I guess negative feedback, is like it's like a very powerful thing, and can be like a very big motivating factor, which I think is a good thing in some respects.
Yeah, it definitely can, and that could lead into the idea that having like lost social connections actually can cause depression, because at the end of the day, like in our human nature, we're kind of tribal beings. Like throughout evolution, humans have always been in like small tribes, and you kind of stick together. You like have each other's back, and that's how you go out. That's how you survive in the world. Like human beings would not have survived very well if they were like lone wolves, like just wandering around by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't have done very well. But it's because of the social aspects that humans have been so successful. And the weird thing is that those tribes and those groups that we used to have are kind of getting broken up, and it's almost rare that you'll see somebody or people that belong to a group like that these days. Like people are far more isolated, especially because of COVID. But even before COVID, I think that was kind of something that had been happening, is that there was a loss of social connection. Like you wouldn't have like the neighborhoods that maybe you used to have, or like even the family connections weren't quite there.
Right.
And just the amount of people, friends and whatnot, maybe that has been slowly becoming like crumbled down a little bit. And then when you reflect on how important it was for our survival to be in a group, it makes sense that if you're alone, you're gonna feel bad.
Yeah. And on that note of feeling alone, I would suggest for anyone that is feeling down to reach out to someone that they trust, and hopefully you can find someone in your life that you trust, that you can reach out to, even if we can't see each other in person. The importance of sharing how you're feeling and connecting with someone, and feeling supported.
And it's interesting to think about it, like on the sense that you said, Ollie, how it's almost like this like primitive thing that I think human beings just like crave in a way, almost like it's like you're hungry or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like people just want to be in these like tribe mentalities. You know, if you think about like sports teams and stuff, it's like let's all get together and do something.
Your team sucks, our team's the best.
It's
like tribalism at its key, but that's like a fundamental thing for human nature. Is people?
I think
we
you want to get
tribal,
together with like people, like-minded people, and feel like you're a team, and like it just feels wrong to be alone.
Yeah.
In the world. And
somewhat of an explanation that I read in the book about that is, they had the theory that if you were alone back in the like I don't know, like 1,000 years or even longer, where like maybe you're out there in the woods like hunting, and you have your whole crew, like they said usually it was like 30-40 people. It was like a nice tribe. So if you got lost from your tribe and now you're all by yourself in the woods, you would start to feel bad, and the depression would almost be like a signal, like, hey, we can't be out here. This is not a good place to be by yourself. So you got to do whatever you can to get back to the group. So it's
almost like a warning.
Yeah, like that's the thing is depression can almost be a signal. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not clear where it's directing you to go, but it's a signal that something isn't necessarily right, and that you could maybe do something about it. And in some cases, maybe it's far more complex than that. Like if there is genuinely some medical things, and we won't go on that too much, but that's
a really interesting way to think about it. Almost like it's like a little alarm that your body's doing.
Yeah, it's
where it's like,
if
right. we don't fix this, it's gonna get worse.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's like, I think, so important to kind of be aware of that, because I feel like I've gone through depressive states where I basically didn't even acknowledge it, because I just like didn't even have like the almost self-awareness to understand that you're feeling so bad. You're just like, I'm just gonna keep going on work or whatever you're doing.
Like I think the problem is that a lot of them don't realize the requirements that people have. So like you have a requirement for social connection, and that can't just be like, you can't just be in a crowd. Like, you can be lonely in a crowd.
Mhm.
It's got to be like a two-way street. That's what they're saying. Is it even like a one-way relationship where maybe you're helping somebody but they're not really giving you much feedback in return? You can still feel lonely, and you could also feel lonely if someone is kind of supporting you and helping you but you're not doing anything in return. It's got to be kind of a two-way a mutual relationship, and that's where you get the most connection.
Interesting. And I feel like those can be hard to find.
Yeah, it definitely can. Yeah, it definitely
Like,
is a challenge.
It's not the easiest thing for a lot of people, I feel like. It's like yeah.
Yeah, even just the idea that we, we're talking on the podcast about feeling depressive symptoms or depression, but we obviously off air have had lots of deep conversations about our mental state and the way that we felt, and I feel really grateful that we can so candidly speak about our mental health when that unfortunately isn't the case everywhere, but I think it's good that we're able to just talk about it.
Because whatever reason there is like a stigma around it, kind of, and I feel like it's almost like something you got to break down in a way and put like effort into it. Like, even for us, like when we first started talking, like we weren't always like this, right?
No.
And I think one thing that maybe could help to break that down is to look at it as, a lot of the time the cause for depression is maybe something super real that has happened to you, whether it's some sort of psychological trauma. Maybe it's like a harsh event. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe you just went through a breakup. Trying to think of some other. Maybe you got like diagnosed with like a bad health condition. These are all things that could lead you. I also wanted to say that, like, maybe you lost your job, or maybe you're struggling to find meaningful work. It could be all of these things, really. But I think that idea that your depression could actually be tied to some of these things helps to break down the stigma a little bit, because you'll be more likely to look at somebody who's depressed, or even look at yourself when you're depressed, as not so much what's wrong with me. It's more what has happened, and what is like maybe the problem that I could now address and kind of try to sort this out. And obviously that might not always be the case for everybody. There may be some genuine roles for medication and all that, but I think for a lot of people it could come down to,
but I think
that.
like either medication or not, or situational, I feel like it's still kind of no fault of your own. It's like looking at it as like it's not the person's fault is a good way to approach it.
It doesn't affect your self-worth.
So,
talking about your self-worth, like you are still valuable and worthy of love, despite the things that have happened to you or the way that you're currently feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like exactly like you said, Ollie. It's like it's not what's wrong with you as a person. It's like there's other things at play, or they can be for sure.
And I think the interesting thing is that it when you have that bit of a understanding, it can give you almost a pathway forward. Like, if I reflect back on the time that I mentioned in the first podcast about man's search for meaning, that there was a time when I was like depressed for quite a while, just because I didn't have a lot of meaning in my life and I had no idea what I was supposed to do with myself. But during that state, I never really I don't know if I fully realized that could have been what was causing me to be depressed, that I had no meaningful goals to strive for, and I didn't find a lot of meaning, and I was kind of lost. I don't really know if I tied those two together. I think I was just like, this sucks, I'm feeling bad. But it's sometimes hard to figure out that there could be perhaps a cause there. You know what I mean? Like it might not just be a random feeling of depression, and it's probably unlikely that you're just randomly feeling depressed. There's maybe actually some ties, whether it's like we've said, your values are being placed on things that aren't necessarily meaningful. Maybe you're not doing like some meaningful work. Maybe your social connections aren't quite right there. Maybe in nature you're not getting a lot of you're not exercising a lot, and you're not going out in the natural world and getting sunlight. But as I'm saying this, it almost just goes to show that keeping good mental health, there's so many things to consider, and it could actually be challenging. Like, it's like, okay, you got to have this and that and all these things, and that when a few of them start to go down, you're almost inevitably gonna feel bad. Like it's almost like a guarantee. Like, I could think if I like lost my job and then I had like no social connections and I was just all by myself, if those two scenarios happen, I could almost guarantee that I would feel depressed. And I feel like there's a lot of situations like that where you could put on somebody and almost guarantee you will be feeling depressed. It'd be surprising if they weren't under the right circumstances. And I feel like that, alone, although it's very challenging to maybe realize what might be causing your depression and then go to try to fix it, I think it should be a little bit of a breaker for the stigma and hopefully give you hope that there is potentially a path forward. How do you guys feel about that? Do you think it's maybe an overwhelming challenge when you consider all those things, or that it actually could be a good thing to think about depression in that way?
Yeah, a little bit of both, because it does sound a little challenging when you think of all the factors that affect your mental well-being. But I also think that it's important to break them down into smaller steps. If you are feeling really down, you might say, I'll just go for a walk today and focus on that outdoor, exercise as well as being in nature. And that's one thing, and just make it small, make it manageable.
Yeah, because it almost like it could be like a full-time job, like working on your mental health. You're just like, okay, today exercising, gonna do, and then like call my buddy and like do all these things, and then you think about like a situation like now with COVID where somebody actually has a full-time job, where in this situation it would be like, don't leave your house, stay inside and like look at the computer screen, and you're busy, this is going to occupy all your time, and then you're going to be tired after. It like takes this like extra effort to stay on top of these things, I think. And I think that's again why you might want to be cautious if you're going to put all of your eggs in one basket and go down one avenue. Maybe you have some really meaningful work to you, but even then, to put it all in there and focus only on the meaningful work might end up leading you to have poor mental health. And unfortunately, when you get depressed, it's actually not very efficient for getting things done. Like we were saying, there'll be a bigger barrier between you and whatever the task is that you're going to do. So we said there'll be a bigger barrier between you and working out, but it'll be the same for a lot of the other things that you want to do in your life, unfortunately. So I feel like you always want to prioritize your mental health, because at the end of the day, it's going to bring the best to you, and you'll be the most efficient and productive, basically, when you're feeling good.
I was going to say, if you guys had to give like one just suggestion for anyone listening of what they could do today that might be beneficial for their mental well-being, what would each of you say?
I mean, we've been saying this like for a while, but for me, the one that I can directly I directly feel the difference in my mood is exercise, for sure. And it's something that I just never did for like most of my 20s. I mean, I didn't have like a schedule or anything, and then it wasn't until like a year or two ago I started like running on like a schedule, and I just find it helps me so much. And it was a really difficult thing to start, but now that I'm doing it, I'm like, this is the best thing I could have done for my mental health.
That's a great example.
Yeah, exercise is so powerful. Something I mean, maybe not simple, but like on the same lines as exercise is just trying to get better sleep, and maybe avoiding getting pulled into rabbit holes on the internet. Like if you get like if you find that you get pulled into scrolling Instagram for 3 hours, like maybe be more mindful of that, and be mindful of how you're feeling while you're actually doing something like that. Because sometimes you might realize that you obviously keep going to Instagram because you like it, but every time you go there, you end up leaving feeling maybe not as good. Or maybe it's not Instagram, maybe it's some you're arguing with someone's grandma on Facebook, or like you know those arguments on Facebook comments. Like I feel like
Yeah.
people are like, Facebook, let me go on. I want to go on, and
I
then you
feel
leave
like
there
the,
in a bad mood because you're fighting with everybody in the comments.
Feel like, I feel like that, like little, you'll get when you're arguing with grandma or whatever, you might get a little like adrenaline like kick, which I think that in itself can be like a bit addictive, where you're like, oh yeah, I gotta get this gotta get another fix of this. Like that made me really excited when I was like getting heated over that battle. But if you can kind of like be aware about how that makes you feel after the fact, which
Yeah.
I mean, in my personal experience is not good at all.
No, and then think about what is it really worth to be arguing with someone's grandma? Like you don't a lot of like sometimes I see these comment sections and people are just fighting for like so long and they don't even know each other, and I don't know if it's like they're bored or what, but I feel like me personally, I would not enjoy arguing with people on Facebook. So that'll be my one, and maybe two is like try to get sleep, because sleep is another one, like exercise, where it physically will help you be in a better mood. Just getting consistent quality sleep. So
right, on a nice schedule at the same time every night, or what?
Apparently waking up at the same time is important. But obviously it's hard. You want to do stuff like on the weekends and whatnot, but like, or I don't know if it necessarily has to be the same time, but like maybe just try to get 8 hours. Like today I slept in a little bit, but I at least got like a decent amount of sleep for me. Some people are lucky and they seem to only need like 6, 7, but personally I'm a big sleeper. I need like 8 at least to feel great. I can survive on 7, which I do a lot of the time, but like 8 is when I actually feel the best.
Yeah, sleep is important.
And Kailey, what about you? I think we could wrap this up. I have to go pee really badly.
Okay.
And both you guys went during this podcast.
I would say phone a friend or reach out to someone that you trust and feel comfortable with. I know I had said that just a little while ago, but I think that goes a long way if you are feeling down, to share that with someone.
Yeah, and I feel like
one.
starting to open up the conversation about mental health with your friends helps a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's kind of like, it's been like a slow burn, like even for us and stuff. It doesn't happen right away, but if you just kind of start talking about stuff like this, I find it helps. Like,
yeah, definitely.
It helps everybody.
It's very courageous to start that conversation and reach out to someone and say, hey, this is how I feel, and put yourself in a vulnerable position. But I think you'll find that because we're all human, there's a lot of overlap in the way that we feel about things, and especially right now we're all going through different journeys, but we all feel sadness or disappointment with the way things are right now, so we can all relate on some level, even if we're very different or our lives are very different.
If you think of that you would find it nice if someone else kind of opened up to you, then it's likely to be the same, that if you were to do that to someone, they would also find it.
That's a truth. It's a nice thought.
Yeah, and we can wrap it up on that. Unless, do you guys have any last statements? No,
I think that's pretty good. It's a beautiful day, so we should go get some exercise.
Yeah, we'll go do these things we've been talking about. And that's one thing that I always want to try to do, is never, like, you can talk about, oh, these things are great. Like, even in the obstacle one that we did last time, I felt like that a lot, where you can easily just be like, oh, just like spin it to a positive and like try to make it feel good. And then I caught myself doing this with the last week with the exercise, where I was just about to talk about how exercise is so important, and then now I'm sitting in a situation where I actually need to act on the thing that I was going to say. And I feel like that's super important, is you never want to be saying all this stuff and not even doing it yourself. So you always like, and you want to do it for good reason, because it actually is beneficial. But you have to have that link, and you can't just be talking and not actually doing the things.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'll find that I'll learn these things or talk to you guys about these things, and then like I'll be alone, and then it's like a different story trying to put them all into action. And it's like it's a hard thing, but like trying to put the effort.
Yesterday I was tested on that.
Okay.
Yesterday I was tested on that because when we were in the car, Sammy, and we were trying to go to the store, and it was a snowstorm.
Yeah.
I was being tested on a lot of the things that I we've talked about in this podcast that I you have to practice.
And it's a good reminder, because like I've, even since that obstacle podcast, for example, there've been some minor obstacles that I've been running into, and I'm like, oh, this is tough. But then I think about what did I tell other people to do? I gotta do that, because like it's so that, and I we did say that during that podcast, that it's all easier said than done, and it's a simple thing, but it's not easy. But you really want to try to do it, and I would feel bad if I was saying this stuff and then not doing it myself. So I always want to remind myself, like, do the things that you're telling or suggesting.
And like for me, like the reminder thing is key. Like I feel like I'll easily kind of just go back into like unproductive ways or like old kind of habits. We need to
have
but
the same topics every 6 months, just
exactly.
for myself to be like, oh yeah, that's
it really
important.
Helps to constantly bring these things up like over and over again, almost until you got them for sure.
Well, I'm definitely down to do another depression podcast, especially because I'm sure there's more to talk about. It's pretty complex, and there's definitely more to learn that we could even bring to the table next time. So we'll do that. But for now, we'll wrap this one up and finish it off. So
goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.